Good evening, residents of Everett, Washington. I would like to call to order this Everett City Council meeting of October 18th, 2023. The City Council meets all requirements of the State of Washington Open Public Meetings Act. Community members are welcome to join either in person, remote, via Zoom, or by calling in. For those who wish to participate in the future via Zoom, you'll find the instructions to register for public comment on the City of Everett website under the City Council Department. Please note that we do not allow comments on any kind of campaigning, whether for or against ballot measures or candidates running for office. We also do not accept comments focused on personal matters that are unrelated to city business. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Mayor Franklin.
Excused.
Councilmember Zarlingo.
Here.
Councilmember Vogely.
Here.
Councilmember Fossey.
Here.
President Stonecipher.
Excused.
Councilmember Schwab.
Here.
Councilmember Ryan.
Here.
Vice President Tui.
Here. Now I'd like to ask Councilmember Zarlingo to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Now I would like to ask Councilmember Fossey to read the land acknowledgement.
Thank you. The City Council wishes to acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Shtahobes people and their successors, the Tulalip tribes. Since time immemorial, they have hunted, fished, gathered on, and taken care of these lands and waters. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. We will strive to be honest about our past mistakes and bring about a future that includes their people, stories, and voices to form a more just and equitable society.
Thank you. We don't have the mayor here tonight, so we'll move on to Angie. Do we have anyone signed up to speak this evening?
Good evening, Vice President Tui. We do not have any public comments tonight.
All right.
Approve the minutes.
Oh, we'll go back and approve the minutes. Do I hear a motion for the approval of the minutes for October 11th?
Councilmember Ryan moves approval of the October 11th minutes.
Second.
Thank you. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Zarlingo.
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely.
Yes.
Councilmember Fossey.
Yes.
Councilmember Schwab.
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan.
Yes.
Vice President Tui.
Yes. All right, we'll move on to council comments and liaison reports, and we'll start with Councilmember Zarlingo.
Thank you. Couple of things. Met last week the Puget Sound Regional Council's Transportation Policy Board and Transit Caucus. I won't go into any detail, but this web of regional, county, and city groups tries to coordinate policy and decisions and funding in a four-county area across the region. It's not a perfect system, but we do have a system like this, helps us do a better job of coordinating and making decisions together. Other council members are on other versions of these committees as well, and I want to recognize good support from administration in their participation in these committee meetings and their support for us to try to do the best job we can. I'll leave it to other council members to review today's Parks and Quality of Life Committee meetings. A committee meeting, and one more note today, I joined with several hundred health professionals at the Health and Wellness Summit organized by the Providence Institute for a Healthy Community. I'd like to recognize their media sponsor, the Daily Herald, along with other principal sponsors, Kaiser Permanente, the Tulalip Tribes, Delta Hotels, and Western Governors University, an outfit that trains a large number of nurses. I was unaware of it before, so I learned a lot today. This is their 9th annual summit held in person this year. A great relief for the group there, first time since 2019. They covered a lot of ground in an all-day seminar, but a couple of quick notes. There were sessions and presentations on health and wellness related data and statistics. That's how we know what we're doing or how we're doing. Some of that is reflected in an article in the Daily Herald today. It's an understatement to say that both individuals and the system are under stress, and some measures are deteriorating while some are actually improving. I was heartened by the dedication of both the speakers and the attendees. These are committed members of vital helping professions. I admire their actions in a system that has some really serious and persistent structural problems and in the face of challenges such as our drug addiction epidemic. One particular finding of note was the role of jobs, job satisfaction, and job security in health and wellness. Positive factors in these areas are really important in providing resources and context to help our community members feel better, to cope, to handle the things they face in life. So I think that's certainly a responsibility of all of us in elected leadership to do all we can to make sure that we have the jobs and the job availability and stability to reduce those kinds of stresses. And then lastly, one of the most moving presentations was by Annie Thomas Landrum, a nurse and head of a small company in Alaska. The title was Finding Our Humanity as Helpers Once Again. She dealt really frankly with overload, stress and burnout, stuff that she had experienced going from being a nurse and a helper and a director of a hospital helping people with PTSD to actually being in another facility treating PTSD on her own. She did her best to help find ways for attendees to cope, and I think that's the kind of thing we need more of, but it shows also how much stress our system is under. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogely?
Thank you. I was able to go to the Everett Public Library Board of Commissioners meeting, and a couple awesome things that have been happening. The library is being nominated or has gotten the award. Now I'm going to have to figure that out so I don't misspeak, but here I go misspeaking. As great partners with Snohomish County Legal Services, and because there's a free legal services at the Evergreen branch monthly, and it is well utilized, and the Everett Public Library is just a fantastic partner, so they have, so I've been told. I'm sure they are. So that's awesome. They've also had the transit guard is being utilized along with the private company security guards. And so there was one at the main library since that started in September, and one just started in at the Evergreen branch. So that was good news. And tomorrow morning is the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting. And I had the agenda, and now I don't have it. Nope, here it is. Everett Transit Technology Projects. We'll have an informational briefing. SS4A, Safe Streets for All, Action Plan Update. And it's always just interesting because there's so much conversation, and it's actually sometimes we don't get to the agenda items. But that starts at 8 o'clock, and it's in the Spada Conference Room, downtown, outside of Metro Everett. And sadly, well, really, I just want to send out my condolences to the families and the friends and the schoolmates and the football team and school personnel and really anybody that has to be involved with now the 2 students that have been shot and killed in our fair city. It's devastating and hurtful, and I really feel for all of you. So I didn't know them personally, but it's a big deal. So I want to just put out my sorrow and condolences. And then to go, you know what, that's it. That's it for now. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Fosse?
Thanks. I'll be quick. Congratulations to Compass Health. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend their celebration. Recently, I was on a corrections tour, but I know that they were launching the construction. Phase 2, some of our council members were there. Phase 2 of the Broadway campus revamped to meet some of our regional behavioral health needs, and that's really, really exciting. I'm thrilled for that. So congratulations on that milestone. And I also wanted to follow up to see if we had any plans on bringing in, given the recent news articles in the Herald, the leadership at Providence to explain the recent death of a community member in their hospital while waiting for service.
I can look into it for sure.
Yeah. Since they were here last, I know that there has been some turnover there. Well, a lot with the nurses, definitely, but also with their leadership. So maybe some updated information. Obviously, they can't speak to the ongoing legal challenges, but maybe they can give us an update on the work that they're doing in trying to make things better so that more accidents and deaths are not coming to our community.
Okay, Councilmember Schwab?
Yeah, thank you. I would like to thank the Office of the Neighborhoods and the Women League of Voters for sponsoring the candidate forum on Monday night. My understanding it is recorded, so I just encourage all that couldn't attend to watch that. Yesterday, I attended the Harborview Seahurst Glenwood Neighborhood Group. It was well attended. The mayor did show up and did a long presentation, so I know the neighbors really appreciated it, answered every question. There were 3 things that were brought up besides the mayor's summary. There was a lot of discussion over the women and children's facility that we're proposing on 5700 block of Glenwood. A lot of discussion on the Four Corners development and the old Kmart development. And I did pass out, there's a lot of concerns about tree canopies, open spaces, and I did pass out some information that the mayor's office sent me, so I was able to at least provide the information and address some of the concerns. There certainly is some competing factors when it comes to growth and density in our city and open spaces. I just, for those that might be watching this, because these chambers are pretty empty today, the city is already zoned for a lot of density. The builders just haven't decided to put in those types of developments. So I think this project there at the old Kmart was kind of almost, I think it shocked some neighbors, not realizing that the builders already have the ability to develop this land, and to see it, things that we put in motion for many years are now starting to come, visible. And so, and then also I know we all want open spaces for our kids to play and to walk safely, and we love our tree canopy. There's some conflicting issues here, some challenging. So hats off to the mayor's office. I know they're well aware of it. Our citizens and residents are starting to become more aware of it because they're seeing they want both. So as we move forward, I think we're going to be, as a council, we're all going to be challenged with those 2 issues. And then the last thing, there's always a lot of talk, and I just want to represent our neighborhoods, traffic speeds, especially around the Amazon warehouses. Those drivers seem to be in a hurry to get to our homes with goods and services. And then the traffic noise, of course, at night is an ongoing challenge. I'd like just to make a quick comment. I don't think on consent item number 4, I don't think we need to make it a proposed action item, but I did have a quick question, and that was, would past retirees be eligible to sign up into the program? I think that was... and then I just want to address one other concern too, and that is I have a grave concern of what's going on in our hospitals. We have a crisis going on in our emergency rooms, and now we have a labor management dispute that seems to be going sour. So very, very concerned for our community and the workers that work there. Thank you.
Councilmember Ryan?
Great, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I've been able to attend a number of events recently. I also went to the Compass Health groundbreaking event, so I look forward to going to the ribbon cutting eventually as well. I know they're going to do great work in our community to address folks that are in need of care in their times of crisis. On Friday, I was a panelist for Snow Track for a group of elected officials in Snohomish County to talk about our transportation systems and things and projects that are currently in the works, and also our hopes and dreams for the future and things that we would like to see with our transportation system. And it was really great to boast about the good work that the city's doing with our Everett Transit department, and our fleet moving over to electrification, with our buses moving to electrification, and just also our Safe Streets for All program, and our focus on ensuring that our transportation system's safe for all types of mobility moving ahead. So it was a great opportunity to share the good work that the city's doing. Yes, thank you to Council of Neighborhoods and League of Women Voters for their candidate forum on Monday, and I wanted to remind folks that ballots are going to be mailed soon, so double check your voter registration at everettwa.gov to make sure that your address is updated, and if you haven't registered to vote yet, then go to everettwa.gov and get registered to vote. I scootled from that over to the Lowell meeting and caught the tail end of a presentation about the various mills that used to line the Snohomish River in Lowell, which was fascinating to see old-time aerial pictures of what's now the waterfront parks and whatnot. It used to be mills with heaping piles of sawdust to turn into paper, and it was just incredible to see what the history of the Lowell neighborhood, as Gail Chisholm will always remind you, Lowell was around way before the city of Everett was. So it was the first incorporated city in this part of Snohomish County. I wanted to give a mention that tomorrow is the Great Shakeout Drill. So tomorrow is 10:19, and at 10:19 a.m. Folks are encouraged to join in local exercises for what to do in case of the big one. And I know here at the county or the city building, there will be folks evacuating the building. So if you're in the area and you see folks that are out and maybe going through some emergency drills, it is just a drill. So, but it's also a good reminder to double check your emergency kits to make sure that you have all of the supplies that you need in case of the big one. And shout out to the county, they have a really great map about isolation islands, which is quite the tongue twister. So when the big one does hit, there's possibly certain population islands that will form because of bridges that go down, or landslides or roadways crumbling. So double check, take a look at the map to see what your community might be isolated to. Some isolation islands are like 7 households and some are thousands. So it's just a good way another way to think about being prepared. Earlier tonight, we had a Parks and Quality of Life Committee meeting with my 2 favorite discussion topics, trees and shopping. And so we got a chance to talk more about the tree canopy work that's happening in the city, and also the Department of the U.S. Forest Service grant and USDA grant that the city received to enhance our tree canopy. The tree canopy will be focused on 7 different census tracts in the city, the areas of the city that have the least amount of tree canopy coverage. So there's more to come on that, but the hope is that most of the trees will go on private property. So we'll be working on reaching out to community members to ask them to ask the city for a tree on their property. So more to come with that. And I also wanted to share that I've also been following the nurse contract negotiations at Providence very closely, and I'm sending my best wishes for an outcome that honors our nurses and the incredible work that they do every day to help people in crisis and who are in need of care. Thank you.
Yeah, I just have a couple of comments. So I do agree with the council members' concern about the hospital and the staffing and what they're going through right now. And our community cannot afford to have a strike. We can't afford to have any more compromises on our healthcare system. So I do hope that they can figure this out in the next day. I think it's less than a day now. So anyway, I look forward to seeing that. Really hope they make the right choices on that. And as far as the trees go, I've noticed I have a couple of large evergreen trees in my yard, and they're really starting to turn brown. So I think this last summer has really been a challenge for trees. So we may have a bigger tree problem in a couple of months than what we think now. So unfortunately. Okay, moving on. Do we have an administrative update this evening?
Yes. So first, Councilmember Schwab, there is a window for past retirees eligibility for that Vera Clinic benefit, and I'll figure it out and report back. But I think it does go back a little bit, but I just don't know how far. So I'll find out. And then I have a little longer than usual update regarding Claire's Place. And our city priority, of course, as you guys and for you all as well, remains focused on the health and safety of our residents and community members. We are really appreciative of the county's support. They have been partnering with us and with Claire's Place. So over the last, it hasn't really been that long, but like maybe a week, I would say. They've helped us source 30 pallet shelters from Everett's own pallet shelter company. Those shelters were constructed on actually city property, but just adjacent to the Claire's Place building on site, like late, sort of through Friday and into the evening. So everything is in place for Claire's Place to move forward with their next steps. That includes relocating their residents so that their remediation process can begin. And both the city and county were in the midst of processing the invoices from Pallet. So the county will be funding about a little bit under $232,000 for 20 pallets. The city's funding $116,000, just under $116,000 for 10 pallets. Our finance department is working on that. We've identified a couple of funding options that are in housing-related, kind of segregated funding sources. We've been following our procurement procedures and processing that purchase and payment. And then I just wanted to share that we really appreciate all the partnerships that allowed this urgent and swift response for the emergency. So beginning, of course, with Snohomish County and Claire's Place and Catholic Housing Services. We've worked with some of our state legislators for their help in researching related issues. And our city staff, who have all made a really amazing, huge lift, many of them who are continuing to do so, including community development staff, administration, facilities, utilities, streets, fire, and police. So I'm really proud to be part of such a great team. So happy to answer any questions if you have them about that. And that's all that I have.
All right, any questions? Councilmember Vogely?
Thank you for that update and for the cost. And while I'm very appreciative that all of the people could work together and do things very quickly, I would be curious. I'll just be a downer. $50,000 is what gets to be spent without council approval. And so I know you're going through proper procurement. Just curious how that works. And so I don't expect you to have that answer right now. But 116 is more than 50,000. And again, everybody is doing fantastic, and I want people to be able to go into a safe environment. But budget. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's it, thanks.
Okay, any other questions from council? Councilmember Ryan?
Thanks. So from what I've read in the Herald and my Everett News, the shelters are intended to be there for 90 days maximum. And then what happens to them? And then adjacent to that question, it's my understanding that if I recall correctly, we used some of our ARPA dollars to purchase pallets, and we have those already? ? So why did we purchase more than using the ones that we already have? And now what are we going to do with these additional ones that we have?
60 days, not 90 days. So it's a temporary use permit for the 30 that are cited there. So, and that site is needed for a big and important reservoir project. Now, there's like a little window of time, longer than 60 days when that construction might happen. But both those things are limiting factors on their location on the site. We are having conversations and reaching out to Catholic Housing Services about their next steps. So that remediation process, the decontamination that needs to occur. And I think that, I think we're sort of at the brainstorming stage. Like if the pallet housing is still needed, are there other locations? Does Catholic have other properties? Is there a way to use their parking lot? There might be some ways to meet needs through kind of a variety of methods if we've got a couple months and not like a handful of days to figure it out. Happy to keep you guys informed, but that's kind of the level that it's at. It's kind of a brainstorming stage of, we know we have a timeline, we should get ready for that now. And then you asked about, we have pallets that we purchased already. Director Willie would know the details, but my understanding was that those were either already in use or cited or dedicated to another purpose, and that's the reason that the new purchase was made, but I'll get something accurate for you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Jennifer. Now we're moving on to our legal. Do we have any update or anything tonight?
There is no report tonight and no executive session.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll move on to the consent items. We have 4. Do I hear a motion for the 4 consent items?
Councilmember Ryan moves approval of consent items 1 through 4.
Thank you. I have a second.
Seconded.
Thank you. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Zarlingo.
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely.
Yes.
Councilmember Fosse.
Yes.
Councilmember Schwab.
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan.
Yes.
Vice President Tui.
Yes. Now we have 6 proposed action items. Items 5 through 9 are second readings and have already been read into the record, but I will be reading item number 10 into the record as a first reading. Item number 10, Council Bill 2310-50, first reading. Adopt an ordinance adopting the State Fire Code, amending Everett Municipal Code 16.005.030 and repealing and replacing Chapter 16.03 of the Everett Municipal Court. Public hearing is, and third and final hearing, public hearing, and the third and final hearing is on November 1st, 23. So do we have any questions or comments on the proposed action items? Okay, seeing none. Next, we have a briefing item. This item comes before the City Council, serving as a council committee of the whole, and is likely to be scheduled at a future meeting. It is item number 11. Council Bill 2310-51, first reading, adopt an ordinance relating to maximum building heights for schools, amending chapters 19.04, 19.05, and 19.13 of the Everett Municipal Code. Public hearing, third and final reading, is on November 1st of 23. And we have Uric here tonight to brief us. Welcome.
Thank you, Acting Council President Tui and members of the council. Good evening. That was just long enough of a title to help me get set up here, so thank you for enunciating. Okay, I got slides. Fantastic. The proposed ordinance that we're bringing to you this evening addresses K through 12 schools, whether public or private. I'm going to skip that one, and does not affect colleges or technical schools. You can see the definition of schools that are at issue here in our development code, typical uses, elementary, junior, and senior high schools, and related uses, sometimes different terminology, but either way, we're not talking technical schools, colleges, universities, or daycares with this. There are 22 public and 4 private schools, K through 12 in Everett. The map in your memo shows where these schools and school properties are today, as well as the map on the screen there. Note that it is possible that a school district could acquire land for school construction beyond what is shown on the map. So we think that anything that would be affected by this ordinance and by a pathway for heights that exceed the zone underlying height limit in general would be attached to where schools currently exist or where school providers own property. But it's important to recognize that it is possible that school providers could purchase or otherwise acquire property that's not on this map that could then be a school in the future. School development, whether that's new construction or remodels or expansions, are regulated under the development code by the use matrix and a set of special regulations in 19.13.180, which provides some locational requirements. Those are grayed out because they're not really at issue here. Things like high schools must be on a collector or an arterial street. and also requires that structures be set back from 25 feet from residentially zoned properties, and then set back additionally a foot for every foot in height over 25 feet from those adjacent residentially zoned properties. Temporary classrooms and small accessory structures have a separate streamlined review process. All of this is just describing what we have right now in our regulations. Schools are allowed in almost every zone in the city. They're prohibited in the heavy industrial and agricultural zones, but the review process for approving a school construction or remodel differs by zone. It's a conditional use permit, that's the C in the grid there, in the RS and R1 zones. It's an administrative use permit in the other residential zones plus the light industrial zones. And it is a permitted use in the neighborhood business, and mixed urban zones. School building heights are regulated by the maximum building height map, which is a separate map from the zoning code, not shown there. For the RS, R1, and R2 zones, in which 18 out of the city's 26 schools are located, that is limited to 28 feet high for the buildings. The other 8 schools that are in different zones, UR3, UR4, or even some of our commercial zones, have a variety of maximum heights. Those are all on page 3 of your memo if you want to refer to them. I mentioned the different review processes, a little explanation on what each of them is. The conditional use permit process is a hearing examiner decision after public notice and an open public hearing. An administrative use permit is a planning director decision after public notice, but not the public hearing. I want to highlight that both processes include this criteria. It's number 3 on the left and number 1 on the right. Compatibility of proposed structures and improvements with surrounding properties, including the size, height, location, setback, and arrangements of all proposed buildings and facilities, especially as they relate to light and shadow impacts on more sensitive land uses and less intensive zones. That's important because this ordinance is going to provide an option to go past that hard height limit that's in the building heights map and replace it with a discretionary review process. And just want to point out that in every case, a proposed school construction or remodel would be reviewed against that criteria that I just read, that does look at the compatibility and the height of the buildings and the orientation of the buildings and how they relate to neighboring uses. A little bit about need. Under the regional geography of Vision 2050, what we've got here on the screen is Washington State Office of Financial Management does population projections and forecasts for every county in Washington State. They just released a new set in 2022. The dark blue shows by age bars, birth at the bottom, 85 plus at the top. Dark blue is the population in each age bracket in 2022, and then the lighter blue is the growth that you can that we are forecasting in each age bracket between 2022 and 2050. We're looking at school-aged population here, aged 5 to 19. That's not exactly, but it's roughly there. Under the regional geography and the regional growth strategy of Vision 2050, City of Everett is expected to plan for about 20% of the population of Snohomish County through 2050. So you've heard about that in the comprehensive plan update process, but we're going to use that number in a slightly different way here, looking at our potential share of expected school-age youth population growth. State Office of Financial Management forecasts that school-age population will grow by 20% and by 30,000 people within Snohomish County. Everett's proportional share of that forecasted growth would be between 4,000 and 6,000 additional school-aged people in the city by 2050, which would represent an increase of about 20 to 30%. So you can see that obviously the big picture with population and demographics is a growing older population, but that does not mean that our younger population is not growing as well, just at a slower rate. So Snohomish County forecasted to add 30,000. Everett's share could be between 4,000 and 6,000 of that by 2050. The lower amount is if you take Everett's current proportion of the county's youth, which is 12% of the county's youth live in Everett. The higher number is the 20%. So if exactly proportional to the county moved into Everett over that 28-year period, you would wind up with 5,900 new school-age children. So how does that translate into school space needs? The State Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction has median school building needs per student, and this is for both existing and planned schools in Washington. Need 115 gross square feet of school space for elementary, 148 square feet per student for middle school, and 173 square feet per student for high schools. If you add that up for each one of those age brackets, elementary, middle, and high school, and apply the average number, then we're looking at potentially needing up to 500,000 or even up to 875,000 square feet of additional school and classroom space over that planning horizon. Note that 2050 is beyond our comprehensive planning horizon, but obviously school construction is a long-term outlook, and so it makes sense to look a little bit farther out in time. That's not going to work without building up with schools, is the thesis of that portion. A little bit about policy guidance from our comprehensive plan. This would be an amendment to the development regulations. Amendments to the development regulations are at the council's discretion, but do need to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Here's a couple of key policies that relate to this. Establish land use patterns that encourage the efficient utilization of land and public infrastructure. Coordinate with school districts to assure an adequate supply of open space lands, and that connects to school construction because, among other things, if you have taller buildings, then there's more land left over for open space, fields, and such. Capital facilities should accommodate the projected growth over the succeeding 20 years in a timely and efficient manner, and all capital facilities shall consider the environment in ways to minimize impacts to it in siting, construction, and use. So the proposal is essentially encapsulated in this slide here. We would remove the 25-foot setback. In most of those RS, R1, and R2 zones, we do have a 5-foot side setback and a 20-foot front setback for all development on their own parcels. And then we would add that schools may exceed the maximum building height in Chapter 1922, which essentially connects to that maximum building height map, when considered under an administrative or a conditional use permit process. If you remember back to the early slides, there were a couple zones that are permitted use for schools. Even though they were permitted with the structure of this language, they would need to jump up to at least an administrative use permit process, which has that discretionary review and the criteria about compatibility with neighboring properties to make use of the provision exceeding the base height. Also, a couple housekeeping cleanup to connect the definition, the titles of the definitions to the titles that are in our use matrix. These are not substantive changes, just clarity and readability. We issued a determination of non-significance under the State Environmental Policy Act, and there's an environmental checklist that provides a policy analysis of this and what the expected impact across a range of environmental functions in September of 2023. That checklist and the DNS, Determination of Non-Significance, are available on the planning webpage under Active Code Amendments. Public notice has been done according to the list that's on page 4 of the memo and up on your screen here. We mail it out to our interested parties mailing lists, neighborhood leaders, our State Environmental Policy Act mailing list, and we published notice of the Planning Commission public hearing and of the upcoming public hearing scheduled with the City Council. We have to date received a comment letter in support from the 2 school districts that serve Everett and Mukilteo school districts. I should note that this was a request of those school districts in the Rethink zoning process a couple of years ago. Staff at the time found that to be outside of the scope of that project. They were seeking to streamline the code but not make major policy changes. So the advice to the school districts was to come back and see if it would fit under another planning process. So that's what brings us here to this proposal. Now I have 25 aerials of schools if you want to get a sense of what they look like, so I will click through them very quickly, but I think it does give some context of how the schools currently relate to their neighborhoods, and you can imagine a little bit about how some taller structures and of course, given that discretionary review, we would look to make sure that the placement was as gentle as possible. Councilmember.
I assume some of these are in excess of
Mike?
I assume some of these that we'll see are in excess of the 28-foot height,
I believe so.
but most of the low-slung ones like this are within that.
I believe, so. Yeah, most of them are single story. Some of them, I think Everett High would be multiple stories and would have been, is in a zone that allows it now. But even if it wasn't, when it was built, it would have been.
Okay.
Councilmember Fosse?
Thank you. Hawthorne Elementary. Okay, so that's where my family goes. I know that there's been a lot of talk regarding the Park District going there, and I have heard from a multitude of community members that keep bringing up the schools. So I know it's a slightly parallel topic, but can you explain with the tall buildings going in there, how that would impact Hawthorne and what that process would be for, because if it's like 1,500 units, you know, some of those units could be 5 bedrooms, some of them could be 3 bedrooms, so that would bring in it thousands of children. So what happens with that? Is Hawthorne, a school like Hawthorne, destined to be rebuilt bigger, or is there another one going to be built somewhere else? And then I have a few other questions later on.
Yeah, that's something that we should definitely check with the school districts on. I know they're aware of the Park District development, and there's a coordination going on there. Park District will be built over phases, over I believe up to 10-year development program. Presumably, hopefully, it is a development that fits different family household makeups and family sizes and everything, and I would expect that it would generate significant new student population, some of which would go to Hawthorne. I'm not exactly sure on the how they might change enrollment boundaries, but of course, being nearly across the street, hopefully that's the school that they would go to. I'm not sure the capacity and how close Hawthorne is right now to that capacity, but if we start bumping up against that, the schools go through a biannual capital facilities plan update process and look at all of the different enrollment factors that face them and connect that to the school funding and capital facilities funding, bonds and levies, and school impact fees are a part of that. So the Park District development haven't nailed down exactly what that mitigation is going to look like, but we would expect them to pay the school impact fees in some form that would help support new construction. If it happens quickly, I understand that we would usually flex space with portables until there's time for permanent classroom space, and sometimes shift boundaries around. There's a variety of ways that that sudden growth can be accommodated, and that definitely does happen sometimes around the city.
Given the height of the Park District, 10 to 15 stories, I think now that they were looking at, would that change anything with, say there was a new school going to be built over the top of Hawthorne? Mm-hmm. Would that change its height at all of what they were allowed to do?
Not by itself, no. So looking at the list here, Hawthorne is in the UR4 zone, and it has a 4 to 6 floor maximum height currently. So this is one of those that may not even need any relief from that, because above 4 floors seems unlikely for most school construction.
And can you tell me why we would restrict the height of schools in so many different places? If we're like looking towards, you know, we want something to be the most efficient, economic, safe place, but best use of tax dollars, why would we have such restrictive school height policies in place?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that it would have been a conscious decision to cap schools. The zoning height maximum applies to all buildings. And so it was zoned. Many of the schools are embedded into lower density residential neighborhoods. So when those were painted with a broad 28-foot brush that brought in houses and schools alike, and parks and some other types of buildings. So I don't know that it was necessarily a conscious decision that schools shall not be tall. It was more nothing shall be very tall, and schools happen to be there as well. And what we're seeing here is that with growth in the city, we're just bumping up against that height limit, especially for our capital or our public facilities, and needing a little bit of a way out.
It seems like that change would allow for that better use of tax dollars and be a little bit more efficient. Was there anything else that the school districts requested, or was this the exact policy changes?
The request was that there are a couple school construction projects that they have in the capital facilities plan that are not going to work at 28 feet. And so something was needed, but staff came up with the exact policy approach, and I think we actually modeled it off of Snohomish County has a similar, they have different numbers, but they had a similar route for schools to exceed the underlying maximum height. I think that's where I borrowed it from, but we wrote it in our own language.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Zarlingo, do you have another question?
Oh.
Okay. Councilmember Ryan.
Thank you. That's leading into my question. So there was a levy that passed a couple years ago for some new schools to be constructed. So I was hoping you could help me understand, will some of those schools now need to literally go back to the drawing board because they can go higher, or if is it going to change? Do you know if it's going to maybe change any of the timelines for schools that already have some plans in place for their new construction? Now that there's different requirements.
Mm-hmm. I think, well, the two that I know of, and one I've already forgotten, but I believe Madison is going to be the first one out of the gate, and they're already working on the plans. And so the best development plan for that needed some additional height, and so I think they've been working with a plan. Obviously, there are options in case this does not go through, but they've been working on the design for that school with the assumption that this would go through. I don't know in the trajectory of a school development project how early it's known how many floors or heights or what the actual layout is going to be versus we know we're going to need an additional 30 classrooms or something like that. So I just check and see who, this will be a good one for the school district. I'll pass along some of those questions. Obviously, I'm not a school builder myself, but.
The school district's website has the Madison replacement targeted for, I think this probably started construction, but spring of 2027. Mm-hmm. So it could be that that's enough time to accommodate the design and make adjustments, but.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, in my district, I know Jackson Elementary is going to be replaced as well. And I think that timeline was maybe a little bit quicker.
That one has summer 2025, so yeah, that might be one that York would have to look into how that's impacted. They have more updates on that. They're deep into the schematic design phase, so they might be further. They're clearly further along.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Schwab.
Yes. Could you just briefly tell me the requirements for like an M1? Is there
The R1 zone?
No, the M1, we have in my district, we have a large private school out in.
Oh, yes, it's an industrial zone.
Industrial, yes.
Yes, it's the high industrial zone. Yeah, that stuck out to me too when I was going down the list. That one has a very high, is it North Shore Christian?
Yeah.
Has a 10-floor height limit, so it could go up over 100 feet currently with no problem.
Some of the neighbors are worried about that.
Yes.
And another question, I didn't, and I just didn't read every word, but was there a setback variance part? Is that already part of the administrative use permit?
It would be reviewed as part of the administrative or conditional use permit, so the minimum setback differs by zone. It's 5-foot side, 20-foot front for the RS, R1, R2 zones that are probably most of interest to many folks because of their placement next to homes and everything. I would think that a school that butted right up to the very minimum of that setback and then maximized the height may not pass muster with those discretionary criteria unless there was some very significant mitigating factors or a real reason for it. We did remove the 25-foot slope thing, which really only impacts a couple of feet on the side. But either way, it seemed like rather than trying to guess what all of the possible permutations would be, we would basically kick all of this into what is a pretty robust process with the administrative or the conditional use permit process, where we would give notice to neighbors and they would be able to explain what the impacts might be from a proposed design and everything.
Thank you.
So I have one question or comment. I know that the Kmart site development is supposed to have, they project 200 school kids, grade school kids, moving in by spring. And so they're going to be bused to View Ridge, which is unfortunate because I think Madison is very close there. So I guess the question I have is when we have another large project like, the Park District, do we notify the schools when that first begins so that they can start to analyze the impact that will have on the schools? I'm hoping we do.
We do, yeah, absolutely. They're one of the first that we notify. Now, that doesn't mean that it's easy to deal with it.
Move fast, right. But I know that there are some folks that are disappointed that they're going to be bused that far and, anyway. And the impact, I don't know how much room View Ridge has either.
Right. And I know of a unique feature of the Four Corners development. That's one that popped in my mind as a sudden change in enrollment, is that they're right on the border of a school boundary, school district boundary. And so potentially you could have students moving a short distance from one place to another and crossing from one district to another, which are some pretty big changes, both for the schools and for them, of course.
Yeah.
Anecdotally, sorry.
That's all I have. Councilmember Vogely, you have something?
Yes. Anecdotally, when kids on Casino, when the school district was being all figured out, kids would live right next door to each other in the same, or different apartments, and some would go to Kamiak, some would go to Explore, and that's within the same school district, but it just made such a big difference. So this could also, it'll be interesting.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right. Well, with no further business, we are adjourned.